What's up, guys? Before we jump to this episode of One-on-One with the great, the American gangster, Chael Sonnen, I gotta keep the house lights on, so a little ad read for you. I partnered up with my friends at FantasyGuru. That's right. I'm not making picks anymore. It's clearly not going well, so I brought in some heavy hitters. The NFL is here. You got UFC, MLB, college football. Let the pros help you out so you make bank. They are expert pickers. That's what they do. These guys know exactly who to bet on, the parlays, all the odds. They're the best in the business. That's why I partner up with FantasyGuru. Don't take picks from me, Drake, or Chael Sonnen anymore. All you got to do is go to FantasyGuru.com, use the promo code SCHAUB, SCHAUB. You get 20% off. 20% off. That's nothing. And you get the best picks from the NFL, UFC, MLB, NCAA. It's FantasyGuru or bust. Go to FantasyGuru.com. Promo code is SCHAUB for 20% off. Now let's start the program.
And now, Brendan Thiccc Schaub.
Mr. Chael Sonnen, what is going on, my man? We got the government's discovered aliens. We got Taylor Swift dating Travis Kelce, and then also Sean Strickland defeated Izzy Adesanya. What is the world coming to, my man?
That is amazing. I like how you couple those together. By the way, is there actually something new on the aliens? There's something new all the time, but did I miss something now?
Yeah, this morning, they apparently in Mexico, they discovered this alien. I'm not buying it. I think it's all a distraction of everything else going on. They found this little kind of weak alien thing, mummified alien. I don't know. If that's an alien, I'm not scared of it, man. It's this tiny little
mummified, thing. Right. It's always mummified or prod with up a farmer's ass. Like, it's always the same story. You're going to have to produce one at some point. Even a photo will do, but there's going to have to be something tangible.
Yeah, you'll see this thing. It's clearly, I don't know if it's, made in a lab. This thing looks weird. I'm not scared of it. If that's what they look like, sign me up, man. It says it's 1,000-year-old alien corpse. I'm looking at it right now. It looks like it'll bum you out. If you're big into aliens and this shows up, it's going to bum you out. It's a real letdown.
I feel like there's been presidents that have tried to tell us. Like, I do feel like Donald Trump did an interview one time, and he got as close as anybody to revealing to the world. And Obama was an interesting one. I think he was doing David Letterman, and Obama made some statement that you've heard 100 times. David Letterman responds, "That's what every president says," and Obama says, "Yes, that's what they want us to tell you." And everybody got this really big laugh, except it felt like a real moment. I'll give you one. You might be too young to know, but when Bill Clinton ran, was 1992 was the first time he was elected. But in the late 80s, early 90s, the phenomenon of aliens was everywhere. If you were in the checkout line or something like this, all the tabloids, all alien all the time. And Clinton said, he got asked a question about him, and he said, "I've always wanted to know that too. And if I'm elected, I will get back to you. I will answer your question." He got elected, and he never spoke about it again, even when people brought it up. And I know that no evidence isn't the case of evidence, but it does feel as though there's at least a phenomenon.
Agree. Yeah, they've tried this numerous times. It's also like with the JFK assassination. Trump was like, "I'm going to be the first president. I'm going to release the files." And then he has access to do it. And he goes, "All right, I'm going to release a certain amount of the files, not all of them, because I don't think the public can handle what else is in there." It's like, well, what is going on here, man? So I think they have good intentions. Then they get to the top and people are like, "You can't. Like, you just can't give all that information out."
That was an incredible one. It was something about 70. I can't remember now if it was 70,000 pages or 70 pages, but Trump did order it. And the head of the CIA was a female at that time. I can't remember her name, but she refused. And Trump said, "I'm giving you an executive order. Release these." And she refused. So they brought Trump in to explain all the reasons why it needed to be redacted or why they couldn't put it out. And ultimately, it did just die. She overrode the president, Scary. Which was also very interesting.
I mean, that one's clear as day. That and aliens. The whole aliens thing freaks me out. Hopefully we find out. Are you more surprised that Mexico found an alien or Sean Strickland beat Izzy?
They're equal in many ways. Sean Strickland dominated Israel Adesanya. And let me tell you how I watched this fight, by the way. I was at an amateur show that was live earlier in the day. I'm an ordained minister. I married my wife's brother. So I got a few things going on. I finally sit down. I'm at this amateur event, though, and I've got it on my phone. So I'm watching the event. I'm looking down. I'm watching the event. I'm looking down. But I know Izzy's winning because every time I look down, they're on their feet. So like 25 minutes later, and I did see the knockdown. I watched when Sean knocked him down the first round and swarmed him, which generally, if you go for a finish like that in the first round, you're not going to win a decision. Your gas tank is empty. So my deduction of just looking down and knowing it was a pure kickboxing match also tells me that Adesanya won. And when they raised Sean's hand, like, my God, I got to go back and watch this. Not only did Sean beat him, he beat him at his own game. That part's pretty interesting.
Yeah, the biggest surprise to me, and I mean, you and I are the only ones that called in the business. We had Strickland winning this thing. You know, with you, me, and, you know, Drake was way off. But I think the most surprising thing is if Monday morning you told me, hey, Strickland won. Okay, would he catch him? He caught him in the first round or knocked him down and got a lucky submission or something like that. And if you told me, no, for 25 minutes, it stayed on its feet and Strickland outstruck him, completely dominated. Izzy was only labeled to land 22 head punches in 25 minutes. I mean, I would have called you a liar. I would have bet my house on it, you know?
For sure.
I just think to me, it's the biggest upset of all time because the weight went down. Matt Serra, GSP, things happen, flukes happen. I get that. And also GSP, when he did lose that fight, wasn't the same magnitude as a star or reigning champ as Izzy was. So I give Strickland the nod over that. So I guess I was just surprised the way that Strickland completely dominated, and also his defense. His defense was insane, man. Absolutely insane.
And to your point about that, like they'll tell you, all you choose is from an amateur wrestling background, but they'll tell you that a pin is the most dominant thing you can do. But I'll tell you as a wrestler, if you get pinned or you pin somebody, the fellow wrestlers go, well, you caught him. I mean, that 10 years later, hey, remember that time you caught me and pinned me? And I feel like the knockout's the same way. And I'm speaking more to doing the rematch. They say we're going to do an immediate rematch. Generally, when we do immediate rematches, somebody got caught. I would argue that Aljo got caught. Aljo had one completed round, and he won that round. He takes one shot, he goes down. A lot of those are the ones who go, hey, we got to see that again. This was so dominant, not to mention in the realm. And Izzy didn't handle this like any former champion. I mean, they all come out with the same story. Oh, my hand was broken. I just went through camp anyway. I didn't want to let you fans down. I mean, it's the same story every time. Izzy didn't tell that story. He took it like a man. He said, we fought. It was a fair fight. This guy won. I appreciated that side of it, but there wasn't something about that match that lends to a rematch. I really understand the star in the business. I get why we're doing it. I just think that it's a little more glaringly obvious in this case, and normally we would try to hide that a little bit better.
I agree. It's kind of like the Amanda Nunes and the Pena fight. They fought the first time. Pena did her thing. The second one was an absolute, there's 10-8 rounds, and Amanda Nunes completely destroyed her. People, let's go for a third. It's 1-1. Nope. It's not justified. We're good. If someone completely dominates like that, it doesn't justify a rematch. And I'm the biggest Izzy fan. I'm a big Sean Strickland fan too. But for Izzy, it was hard for me to come on the show Monday and go, I'm not all for the rematch because it was a 25-minute domination. Rogan and I were watching it doing the fight campaign. Rogan, Sam Tripoli, me, and Callan, we had it 5-0. There's argument 4-1. Sure, I'll entertain 4-1. Outside that, you're not giving Izzy a single freaking round. So the rematch just isn't there for me. If you're Dana White, and I get the business aspect of it, Izzy's a massive star. He's probably the biggest star, not named Conor McGregor. So we know Izzy's a massive star. He's good for business. So we see why they would do an immediate rematch. But there's something to it where the new matchups, the new blood in the division is exciting. So if I'm Dana, and also I want your thoughts on this. If I'm Dana, Izzy needs to rest. You know this as well as anybody. When you're a champion, you have to do different things that these other contenders don't have to do. You're selling the pay-per-view. Heavy lies the crown. It's exhausting. And Izzy's very active as a champ, might be the most active champ I've seen in my lifetime. He's active as hell. He's fighting the top guys day in, day out. And then he's also responsible for selling the pay-per-view because he's beat everybody. And people are prisoners of the moment. And they go, he was never that good. No, you're getting confused. He's so good. He lapped the middleweight division. They had to do rematches, and he beat those guys. So those people are just prisoners of the moment. But I do think there's something with Izzy where it didn't look like our typical Izzy. Now, I'm not taking anything away from Sean Strickland. Maybe Sean Strickland just has his number. Okay. But it didn't look like our normal Izzy. He looked tired. I think being active as the champion, being that active at that high of a level, he just needs a break. And he can come back, fight Du Plessis, even if it's not for a title. I'm in for that. But I just think Izzy could use a break, let the division build other stars, and then come back.
I certainly wouldn't have a problem with that. You know, anytime you do a rematch, you're going to get asked the same question. And the answer doesn't overly matter. You just have to have an answer. But what's going to be different this time? And that is where it gets complicated. I mean, they fought that fight where Izzy wanted to fight it. There's not going to be a make-believe interview that Izzy comes out and says, well, I knew I should have taken him down. I knew I should have pinned him up against the fence and dropped my elbows. Like, that's where I think that it gets a little bit tough as a selling feature. Nothing went wrong in that fight. Everything went perfect. And for whatever reason, Sean Strickland was better at it than Izzy was. And I do feel like, imagine that Izzy does say it and he goes, oh, no, nothing's going to change. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to do it better. You go, it's kind of a weird one because, Brendan, the only reason it gets weird, what happens if Izzy comes back and beats him, which right now he's the favorite. The new line came out. He's a minus 120. He went off at a minus 600, but he's still a favorite, even a slight. What if he beats him? Something tells me we don't go to the trilogy. Something tells me if we get the belt back around Izzy, we don't extend the same favor to Sean that Sean's going to have to show to Adesanya. And I just think that adds to your point. Maybe it's time to take your oars out of the water, let that division build. Izzy has said himself a number of times that he would like parity. He would like some different matchups. He's tired of being in there with the same guys. I mean, how many times did he fight Pereira? I believe it was 4 times in total.
Correct.
And it gets to an interesting point. You know, what do you do with Du Plessis? I know he's sitting there thinking he's the number one contender, but in a month, we're going to have Chimaev and Paulo Costa. They're going to come steal a lot of thunder. They're going to get built up. I'm quite sure before that fight goes off, they're going to announce that this is the number one contenders match. And it just feels as though Du Plessis is going to need something to do. And him fighting with Adesanya, not for a title, I love it. What's the difference? In many ways, what's the difference? If they have a problem with each other, they never said it was about the belt in the first place. They just want to fight. The fight still works. They can still do it.
I agree, but if you're Du Plessis management, you know, and let's say Izzy needs a break. If you're Du Plessis, can you afford to sit out and be out of the public eye, be out of the kind of the MMA fight talk for 7 months, 6 months?
Sure.
Can Du Plessis afford that, or does he take on a guy like Cannonier and stay active and become undeniable?
Yeah. No, that's the tough one. I don't know. I mean, I've got that same question as it pertains to Michael Chandler. Like, whatever's going on with Conor McGregor, it does not appear that he's going to be fighting anytime soon. And if we're to listen to USADA, the day he decides he's going to fight, that's when a six-month clock starts. I mean, half of a year. At some point, Chandler's got to put his foot down. And Brendan, that fight, by the way, and I know I'm jumping around, but that fight has felt very weird. I was on my way to Fedor's retirement fight against Ryan Bader. I remember where I was when I got the news it was going to be Chandler versus McGregor. And it didn't feel right from Jump Street. Then they got Dana, Chandler, and Conor, and 3 different people interviewed them. They don't know the interview is going on, so they're all giving different answers. Chandler says we're doing it at 55. McGregor says we're doing it at 70. And Dana says we haven't found a weight class yet. If you don't even know what weight class you're doing it at, there is no fight. And they went from there, continued to say there was one, went off to the Ultimate Fighter. Conor McGregor now, according to social media, which I get that he's a troll, but most recently says, we're going to do it at 185. And Chandler instantly responds and goes, great, let's do it. It's like, Mike, at some point, you don't have to look so willing. At some point, somebody here is going to have to play hardball or nothing. If nothing changes, then the outcome doesn't change. And the outcome right now is you guys aren't fighting.
Agree. That fight from the jump has always been a little strange. To your point, we've never seen anything kind of that get, you know, my boy Casey, who's my producer, he's the biggest Conor fan. I'm a huge Conor fan too. You know, gun to the head, does the fight happen? I don't know. I still, to this day, they went through the Ultimate Fighter. You know, they've talked about 55, 70, 85. I just don't see it happen. And again, to your point, Chandler needs to just go, I just need to fight. And I think, you know, it's like when you're chasing the hot girl, the more desperate you are, the more they're like, nah, I'm good, man. You know, so I think Chandler needs to play a little hard to get and go, you know what, I'm going to move on. UFC, give me another fight and see how Conor reacts. Be the hot girl in school. Be the hot girl in school. And I think as it pertains to Strickland and Izzy, you know what, the thing that I think about is Strickland way better than we thought? Is he that damn good, or did Izzy have an off night? Without taking away, you know, what Strickland did, is Strickland that damn good and we just didn't see it? When you go back over his record, you're like, all right, that looks pretty good there. Well, that last fight, he did look, damn, when you think about it, he looked pretty good. You know, you go through his losses, and, you know, we've talked about this off air. Strickland used to come into the rain. And you have a story how, you know, he'd come in there and you said he was king of the cage champ. I don't remember him well in those days. I remember him a little bit, but he's always been kind of, you know, when he came into the UFC, he was kind of this blue chip recruit, man. He was a big deal, fell off a little bit for whatever reason, and then now he's back. So I guess what I struggle with is Strickland that damn good, or did Izzy just have one of those nights? Or is it a combination of both?
It's really hard, right? Like, I respect kickboxing. I've sparred with Joe Schilling before and really felt like, wow, there's these high-level guys and the rhythm they have and the techniques that they have. I mean, I really respect it. Sean Strickland, to the most part, I think is self-trained. I've never heard him talk about, you know, the day at 8 years old, my dad dropped me off at Freddie Roach's gym or something like this. I've never really heard that. That goes with his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu, too. You know, he's just kind of one of these tough guys. So I would have to think that Adesanya is better, but that's not what we saw, right? There was something awkward about Sean Strickland. They did a stat on Sean. It was many fights ago. I want to say he was fighting Jack Hermanson. But the announce team puts out a stat that Sean Strickland has the greatest defense in the middleweight division. To show you what their math was, they just looked at how many punches were thrown at middleweights, how many landed versus didn't land. And Sean Strickland had the highest. He's very hard to hit. You know, he comes in with this stance, and you've never seen MMA fighters. Sean Strickland and Chuck Liddell are the only ones that have this stance. Everybody else gets clipped and they got caught. They got to keep their hands up. So he is very unique. I think that he surprised himself. Every now and then a fighter gets in a fight that isn't as hard as he thought it was going to be. Like, I maintain to this day, there was nobody more surprised that Justin Gaethje beat Tony Ferguson than Justin Gaethje. And I think that Sean just started to feel that momentum. In many ways, it wasn't the fight he was supposed to fight. He didn't threaten the takedown, by example. He didn't get to the clinch. He didn't put any major effort in to get the takedown to start with, which is what we all thought he was going to have to do. I mean, it was a very lazy approach back to 1993 of grappler versus striker, but it still didn't happen. It's like Sean did everything that Izzy wanted to do. And so how high level do you have to be? I mean, I got to look at that and I instantly think about Francis and Fury and go, well, yes, maybe it's not quite as hard as we think it is. Maybe you get a guy that's a little awkward and does stuff you're not used to. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm accepting, but yes, to see that Sean Strickland was a better striker than Adesanya, I thought that was mind blowing.
Yeah, maybe we're overthinking it. Maybe we're making the fight game too complicated. You know, you try and make it like the NFL or like baseball, where a lot goes into it, a lot of planning goes into it. And then the day it's just two dudes fighting. You know, and Sean Strickland's able to break it down to meat and potatoes, and, you know, he spars more than anybody. And there's been this trend, you know, the same as the NFL, you know, Tampa 2 coverage was successful. So the rest of the teams did that for the next 5 years until they adapted a running quarterback. They did that forever. So it's a copycat league. The UFC is the same, you know, so I think I'm going to be curious to see if fighters go, look at Sean Strickland. He's the champ, man. All he does is spar. Forget all this technique we've been doing. Let's just spar. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I think it works for Sean Strickland. I don't know if it's going to work for everybody else. And I'm also curious, I want your thoughts on this, Chael. You know, you're a marketing genius, some would say. You look at your career and the way you mix it up and became infamous for a variety of reasons in your fight career. What is the UFC marketing team Monday morning when they sat around? Are they like, we got one. Here's the guy. With Sean Strickland, he's different. Now, here's how he's different. And I think there's a way they can run with this. I think in a world of these gimmicks that we're living in, you know, you click on YouTube, it's, you know, Chael Sonnen, you know, wrestles two gay guys naked, and you click on it, it's you just wrestling, you know, at some camp. There's nothing to it. So there's all this fake smoke out there. There's AI coming. There's all this fake, you know what I'm saying? There's Instagram. It's not real. Sean Strickland is authentic as they get. And I think, and he attracts a certain fan base who are, they don't have a lot of heroes. You know, a poor white kid grew up from nothing, and he talks about this, and, you know, former neo-Nazi and all this horrible background, you know, horrible father, horrible parents, and he's made it, and he's their champion. I think there's a way to market this because the masses are appealing to Sean Strickland. And I think if they just take away, you know, obviously he's going to say some off-putting stuff. I don't agree with everything he says, but what I do agree with, he's authentic. And that's what they're starving for it. In comedy, in podcasting, in their athletes. How many times do we see a UFC fighter, NFL guy go, it was a perfect game plan and respect, and then, I'm just whoever's next. We don't want to hear that. Tell us how you feel, man. Sean Strickland is going to tell you how he feels. The UFC just has to let him do his thing. He might not bring on the big Nike sponsors and the Burger Kings of the world, but what he is going to do is appeal to a mass audience. So I think it's a good thing if they let Sean Strickland do his thing. Are you worried about it?
Well, to your point, and people sure do appear to be attracted to it. Like his crowds are massive. I mean, he almost had a Rocky moment where he flipped the Australian crowd, which appears to be a pretty cool crowd to start with, I must say. I mean, they're pretty opening and inviting, but, even Adesanya, who's clapping for him at the end, yeah, I'm a little worried about it. I mean, early in his career, and I say this as somebody because he was at Reign, where, I do have a care for him and want him to do good things. I was a little nervous. They're not going to be able to put him in these massive spots just because they can't give him a main event, just because they can't have him doing media. But he has found a way to navigate that, and there is something that does seem very real. He was talking about the belt and saying that, the belt doesn't matter. Then he asked somebody, how much can I get for it? And somebody told him $1,700. And he's like, that's not even enough money to put spinners on my Honda Accent. It was one of these things, but everything that he does work in terms of being a real guy. I think that he's the least likely to, be pulling up in a Ferrari tomorrow or overspending on a big house or stop going to practice because he's at the cool party. There is something very real about him. He's rough as hell. He's rough around the edges, but he's also the champion of the world. And, in America, the number one things that matter is success. He's found it. I mean, this guy's going to be really, really big. I'd love to see if he pushed back on Adesanya. I mean, I get why you do the rematch. I would just love to see where his power lies. And Brendan, can I tell you my favorite fight going on right now? Nobody's talking about this, but for me, my favorite fight is for main event on the December pay-per-view. All the rest of the pay-per-views of the year have been announced, but for the December card, you have Conor McGregor going to social media declaring that he's fighting Chandler. Now, Conor's at least serious that he wants that date. It looks like they're not going to give it to him, but he wants it. Leon and Colby are supposed to fight this year, and the clock's ticking. That would mean that they've got to fight on the December date. Volkanovski has changed course and said, I'm no longer interested in doing Islam because I would have to wait until 24, and I want to fight Topuria this year. So that would put him on the December date. And then Sean O'Malley, before he leaves the ring against Sterling, not only calls for Cheeto Vera, but he calls specifically for the December date. So it really is interesting to find out who's got the power and who the biggest star is. And there's some of these guys that are all going for the same thing. It won't get talked about and look the same. I hope that I'm setting this up well because it really is interesting. All these guys are flexing behind the scenes. None of those guys want to be a co-main event, right? I mean, you got four champions. Someone's going to have to co-main event. They're all going to have to co-main event if Conor steps forward. I just think it's an interesting thing. And O'Malley does have some news coming. I have to assume that news means a fight. If he's got a fight, I have to assume December. But if he gets it, look at the guys that he just beat out. The UFC has their choice of champions. Whoever they go with in December, that's saying a lot. It's saying this is the guy we think can move the needle. And
I assume that's Sugar, especially without him saying he has news. I would assume that's Sugar. When all those names that you listed there, as far as when it comes to markability, selling pay-per-views, I assume that's Sugar. And do you assume it's Cheeto?
I assume it'd be him versus Cheeto. Yeah, I think Aljo's. Historically speaking, I think he's owed a rematch. Generally,
me too.
If you get caught, you do a rematch. Anytime you're hit with one punch and you go down, that goes into the criteria as caught. Plus, I think he had set a record with defenses, even though it was only a couple, but bantamweight, it's such a musical chairs over there. Aljo did make one mistake, though, which is he didn't ask for the rematch. He did not in the ring ask for it, so Sean moved on to Cheeto. Cheeto was there. The press conference is in the back. He got all three players there. It seemed like maybe he did things in the wrong order, but I don't think that Aljo going to social media is going to be able to build a fire as much as the one that he smoldered live in the ring. And I don't think he's next. I don't think Merab playing the game of I'm not going to fight Aljo. I don't think Henry's in the discussion, even as great as he is. Yes, I think it's Cheeto.
Me too. I agree. I think it's Cheeto in December. There's also a case too. Strickland didn't have a scratch on him, and Strickland likes to stay super active. So him being champion, and he doesn't seem like a guy who's gonna, hold the belt and pick his opponents. I think he's down to dance with whoever, whether it's Hamzat, Paulo Costa, the rematch, Duplessis. He doesn't care. If we're going based off the way he's carried himself leading up to becoming champion. So I think with Strickland, there is a possibility where he goes, I want to turn around fast like I've always done. I want to fight right away. Who's available? Duplessis, cool. We don't know where he's at with his injury. Obviously, Paulo Costa and Hamzat, they're fighting in October. There's no way they fight in December unless, Hamzat or Paulo Costa is a quick turnaround. It's a one-shot, night's over type of fight. But I'm curious how Strickland acts as a champion now. Is he going to carry the same energy, how active he is? Because to him, I don't think the title, obviously it's not filling whatever hole he has going on there in his soul. Just he didn't seem like the type of guy, the guy that gets the belt and he's going to call his shots. I think he's going to be, a good company man. And that's not a knock on him. That it goes a long ways when you do that. So I think he's going to be an active champ. So there's a possibility he could be on that December card if Duplessis, which I don't know where he's at. You want to talk about Duplessis, you want to talk about not taking advantage of your opportunity. They offered you a title shot, dude. You have to, and I bet he was watching that fight going, oh no, I could have beat this guy. And now, who knows? He might get left behind.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And that was a very interesting case as it was. I mean, just a quick timeline, but go back to December 10th. That is when Prochazka was supposed to rematch Glover Teixeira. They were going to do it for the belt. Prochazka gets hurt. They not only don't do the fight, they take the belt off him, which I found that to be shocking, by the way. 1 week after he announces he's hurt, he's no longer champion. If you're going to strip a guy, that kind of says you don't think he's ever going to come back. And it was even stated this is the worst shoulder injury we've ever seen. So they took the belt off a guy while simultaneously having a heavyweight that had ACL surgery, sat for 10 months, and there was never even a threat they were going to take the belt off him. I just think that that's interesting. They put two new guys in. By January, Prochazka says, I'm ready. I can go back in. And it's like, okay, I believe you, Prochazka, because you're the one that told us in the first place that you were hurt. But what do we chalk this up to? Is this a misdiagnosis? That'd be great. Is this a miracle? Like, what is it where you were stripped in December, but you're back by January? Now you've got all of this time that's gone by. And allegedly, again, he's back. But there's no rumor of an opponent. There's no rumor of a return date. Like, I just think that it's a very interesting case with Prochazka. It gets revealed to us by USADA that they tested him 25 times in 27 days, which had never happened before. Nothing was flagged and nothing came back. But at the same time, we don't hear anything about Prochazka, to the point that when Jamal wins the belt in January, you would think it'd be a somewhat quick turnaround. Jamal gets hurt and drops the belt in July, 7 months later. But again, he didn't have a fight booked. There wasn't even a rumor of an opponent for Jamal. So, and where I'm going with all of this is the fact of if they do turn Strickland around, the way they are turning O'Malley around. Like, some of these guys can't get fights that are champions. Some of these guys can't stay out of the cage. They've got them acting. They've got them busy all the time. Sometimes that attitude is good. And sometimes, I'm just sharing with you, like, there is a lot of politics that goes into it. There's a lot of numbers that we don't see, but it's also kind of put right in front of us. Nothing happened with those light heavyweights, and those light heavyweights won't sell out any arenas. All of a sudden, bantamweight is rising up. All of a sudden, Sean Strickland is the champion of the world. He's on a different continent. He's got 17,000 people on their feet cheering. It's a very different time. And all of this goes on with an overlaying story of, it appears, Conor McGregor is not as needed as he once was. You've got Conor McGregor begging to come back. He's serious about that. He wanted that December date. He wants to get in there. He knows he's not playing ball with USADA, but he thinks that there's a clause in the contract that could be activated in his favor, which Conor is right, in my opinion. There is a clause, and he doesn't have to do the 180 days. But now the question comes, does the UFC want to take on their partners in USADA over a guy that doesn't move the needle that much more than the new guys? Red Panda Night is still real. Conor's still the biggest star. It just appears that it's closing. We're at a very different time in MMA, Brendan.
Very different time than when we were competing, my man. I think it's also interesting, too, if you're Alex Pereira, he has a win over Izzy, has a win over Strickland. Let's say he goes out there and beats Yuri. Is there something in Alex Pereira where he goes, you know what? Now that Izzy's not the champ, I'm going to go back to, I'm going to be the double champ here. I'm going to go back to middleweight. If it's Strickland, I've already beat him. If it's Hamzat, if it's whoever it is, Robert Whittaker, Duplessis, I think Alex Pereira's looking, going, I would beat any of these guys. This is easy to get another belt. I could see that happening. It's a good time in the business, good time for what we do. I think, for what we do, Izzy, as much as I love Izzy, him losing and Strickland beating him, I was excited to come in the studio Monday, because if he would have just walked through him, there's not a lot to talk about, so I wasn't mad at that in any facet. You would know probably better than most. This WWE merger, which was announced yesterday with the UFC, and they rang the bell at NASDAQ. How do you see this is a good thing? I think they're evaluated at $21 billion now. The TKO Group, which is the name of the WWE and the UFC, they're one kind of company now. I think it gives them power as far as TV ratings and TV deals. I don't know how much longer UFC has with ESPN or WWE has with Fox, but I could see them making some big waves when those TV deals are up, and that's where they get their main nut. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they kind of use that power that they have now, merging together the WWE, $21 billion company. I'm curious how it's gonna go. I think all good, but I think where it gets a little murky is the casual fan. I think it's hard for them to separate. Hold on. So you're telling me, Roman Reigns and Izzy under the same banner? So is Roman Reigns going to be fighting, insert John Jones? Is that how this goes? So it gets a little weird. I think they do have to keep them separate, but I think it could be good.
I'm dying with curiosity on that as well, right? Like, nobody buys a company of any size, $21 billion or $200 to keep it the same. They all grow because they see opportunity to make it grow. And that's where I'm so curious. I mean, Ari might change the way TV is done. If, like, getting these two together, what are they going to do? Their own network? Maybe. They've got the WWE network. They've got Fight Pass. But is it something along those lines? Or are they just going to keep going to the highest bidder? But I mean, not for nothing, what would stop baseball and football from teaming up? Like, if whatever plan Ari has actually works and you can make more money having both as opposed to separates, I mean, I will tell you, it's a different level of business, but he's also up to something that hasn't been seen before. It's not black and white, and there's not an example. We go, well, yeah, this was done in 1980 with the such and such. It's never been done, and I don't know where he plans to go with it. I'm extremely curious. I remember that, Dana, when he started doing weekly shows, people all pushed back, said that's too much. And Dana said, is there too much football? Like if you're a fan, there's not too much. Once a week is enough. Does Seinfeld go too often? Whatever examples Dana gave, but he turned out to be right. Turned out there was an audience. Turned out people did like to do that on Saturday, turn their TV on and watch it. And by the way, I'm jumping around, but you brought up Duplessis a minute ago. I lost my train of thought, but I've refound it. Where I was talking about on Duplessis, and the reason I went back to that December show with the light heavyweights, I didn't know who Duplessis was. He had a very beautiful name, Thiccc Duplessis. I assumed he was French, and people were calling him like DDP, kind of like GSP. Turns out he's South African. I had the whole thing wrong, but I share that with you because I didn't know who he was. He was on the undercard.
I agree.
And that night, way back in December, same weight class of 185, Bo Nickal was to be on the main card in a debut. And Thiccc Duplessis lost his mind. He went on Twitter and he was telling everybody, how can I, with all these fights and all that I've done, have to jerk the curtain for this guy making a debut? And if you think it's a skill issue, then just put me in there with him. I will fight him, but I'm taking that main card spot. You had the light heavyweights get hurt. You had a shuffle of the deck. The squeaky wheel gets the grease and Duplessis comes up. But this is an incredible reign to go from undercard in December to right now. He was supposed to have fought for the world title on a brand new television network in front of a sold out arena. I mean, it was a really big difference. And as he starts getting his come-ups, they go, okay, you're going to have to prove it. Here's the hardest guy we have, not named Izzy. His name is Robert Whittaker, and nobody, not named Izzy, has been able to deal with this guy. Thiccc goes out there, he beats him. He looked like a top five ever. I don't know 5 middleweights ever that could beat that guy that Whittaker had to deal with. Everything's going his way. And we all knew going in, if he wins, he's going to go in September on this brand new television deal opposite Adesanya, hosted in Australia. Like, all of these things were put in place to the extent that they flew Izzy in and sat him in the front row because he knew he was going to come face to face with whoever the winner was. Something happened within that interview. If you watch the body language of Duplessis, something happened. They keep a camera on him. They fade to black, roll the credits, but now you can go over the internet. They show him coming through the curtain. He's still sweaty, he hasn't put a T-shirt on. They're going to take his gloves and decompose him. They're going to hand him his check. All those things that you do. Somebody puts a camera on him, and the very first thing he says when they ask him about his new fight with Adesanya is, I want to talk about Robert Whittaker. So they go do the Whitaker thing, and they ask him again, and he says, I'd rather not talk about Izzy. I think I'd like to talk about Robert Whitaker. So then he goes to the press conference, and now he does have his shirt on, but he's still sweaty. He's still hot in the moment. They ask him about Adesanya, and it was one of those extremely rare occasions, right? Every time you go to a press conference, Dana has to say the same thing as, well, let's see what will happen. It's extremely anticlimactic. This is one of the very few times we know what's going to happen. The whole reason we held this fight is to know what's going to happen. And he says it a third time. I don't want to talk about him. I want to talk about sharing the cage with Whitaker. And I've got some injuries. I've got some things I might want to rehab. It's like, man, you got the right to do that however you want, but every fighter in history would tell you right there in the moment. They'd hold up their foot and go, my God, look how swollen this thing is. I'm going to have to get with my doctor. I want to do that fight, but I got to get some ice on this. He had like these mystery injuries that he never disclosed. He took a couple of days to get his head around it. Decided to defer to a foot, and I'm just saying it didn't feel right, and I'm not accusing him of faking a fight to get out of it. I know that he faked the injury. What I'm saying is sometimes you can't run those back, right? Like, it's really hard to imagine Duplessis against Strickland. The UFC is going to go, okay, we're going to give you a chance to fight a guy who did what you were unwilling to do. He shocked the world in doing it, but we're going to give you a chance to go in and steal his thunder without ever having to do the one thing that you really didn't want to do. And it just doesn't work that way. I can't think of a time in history where it worked that way. And I bring it to you because he thinks he's the number one contender. I don't disagree, man. He's a total stud. Whatever got in the way, though, it got in the way. And I don't think there's any way to get to a belt if your name is Duplessis without going through Adesanya. So whether you can get him now as both of you are contenders, or you got to wait your turn until he becomes champion, you got to do it again. I don't think there's any scenario where the UFC allows Duplessis to be champion unless he goes through Adesanya.
I agree 100%. And I don't know what's going on there, but I do think Duplessis too, whenever you turn down a moment like this, even if you're hurt, let's say, he was actually hurt, by turning that down, Dana does not, this better than anyone, especially me, Dana doesn't reward that. They're not going to reward you with a title shot with Strickland because you turned down the fight against Izzy. I just don't see the UFC rewarding it. Even though the fan base, I see a lot of, DDP for the, let him fight Strickland. There's just no way Dana's going to reward him turning down a fight to get, on paper, an easier fight at the title shot. To your point, I don't see it happening. I just don't. And people are like, oh, what's your issue with DDP? I have no issue with him. I think he's a phenomenal fighter. He's so awkward. He's going to be a tough night in the office for anybody. My issue is the way he's carried himself since he's beat Whitaker. Now, it might not be him. Maybe it's someone in his ear. Maybe it's his team. But either way, over history, Dana doesn't reward that stuff. So I'm going based off that. I think the Paulo Costa Hamzat is going to get the next shot. Hands down, bar none. I think they announced that.
Well, and what an interesting one that one has. I mean, not for nothing, but Paulo Costa and Chimaev gets made. Like 5 months ago, Paulo Costa's going through a contract dispute. They get the contract done, and they give him, in October, on Fight Island, Khamzat Chimaev. Great. Everybody's running with that. You could ask either one of those guys, or their camps, or their trainers, or their girlfriends, for that matter. Everybody knows that's the fight. It never gets announced officially, and then all of a sudden, for Salt Lake City, Paulo Costa is going to come and fight with a Russian gentleman. I don't condescend. I don't know how to say the guy's name. I'm going to call him a Russian gentleman. So they're going to fight. That's returning Paulo Costa to Salt Lake. That's where he had that knockdown drag out with Luke Rockhold and was rubbing the blood on it.
Tough fight.
They tried to pad that card, get some ticket sales. That's a guy. They return him home. Fine. Now Chimaev's left with nobody, to the point that it looked like Jared Cannonier, purely because nobody else would do the job. All right, fine. 1 week before you're supposed to get on the plane. So training camp is done. The weight loss, for the most part, is done. 1 week before Paulo Costa is supposed to board a plane in Brazil and fly to Salt Lake, the UFC pulls that fight. And they keep the Russian on the card. They give him a new opponent, but they pulled Paulo Costa. And in the history of the UFC, I've seen them lose fights. Somebody gets sick, somebody gets hurt. I know that they change things. I've never seen them break up a fight. They try to bring the card to the audience as close to what they said they were going to do as possible. So they pull Paulo Costa, and then it gets revealed. He's not hurt and he's not sick. He's going to go fight Chimaev in October and Fight Island, which was the initial plan to start with. They got in their own way, realized we need to do it over here, and they did it over here. But imagine this, Brendan. If you're Paulo Costa, your manager's done his job, your coaches have done his job, all your sparring partners have done their job, they're going to want to get paid. So all of a sudden you get a call, all the work that you've done without illness or injury or fault to you, we're taking it back and you're going to go do it in October. I don't think you could get a yes out of him unless you sweeten the pot. And to sweeten the pot means you promised him this would be a number one contenders match.
Agree.
I think that promise has already been made. It's been stated publicly by Dana that if Chimaev declares 185, which is to be identified by let's 170 go, and he has one victory, then he will then go on to fight for the belt. So it just looks like that's the number one contenders match. I think that Duplessis is a floating target. I think he's out there. The night that he argued that Bo Nickal shouldn't be on pay-per-view and he should, or the same night that he said, I'll fight Bo Nickal, it seems like there's an opportunity right now. Like if you're Bo Nickal, you're not getting a world title fight. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. You're not getting that opportunity. Why not go get the next best thing, though? Why not go get a guy that's in line? It just seems like for middleweights, if they could open their eyes and see what's going on in their landscape, there's a lot of guys to go after. There's a lot of guys that could put you in a position to then eventually leave for the title. And that was one thing that was cool about Sean Strickland. He never talked about the belt. He just talked about opportunities. If the belt happened to be a byproduct, okay, fine. But it's one of the reasons why as a 6-1 underdog, we were still willing to come along the journey. We were still willing to watch him because it was never about the belt. He wants to beat this guy for whatever his reasons were. I actually missed the whole Chinese thing. I know that he brought that into it. I don't actually know what he's referencing. I think it was like a commercial or something. Do you know the Chinese story as it pertains to Adesanya?
I heard it secondhand, but from what I heard is Izzy proclaimed his love for China because Izzy used to have some sort of contract with China with kickboxing, and he went over there and just loved the culture, and obviously he's embraced over there. So he wore the Chinese color, shorts. And again, that I forgot to mention this. I think part of the reason what made Strickland so big and so lovable in this was a lot of mistakes by Izzy. Obviously in the octagon, Izzy made a lot of mistakes. I think the way the marketing, he had some miscues. With the whole dog stuff was a little strange, a little off-putting, I think, for people. And then also the Chinese shorts. Now, we know it, for the most part, unless you're living under a rock, Izzy's not Australian. Izzy is not Australian, but he's sure as hell not Chinese. So I think it was a total miscalculation on Izzy's part to represent the Chinese colors. And I think that put the Australian fans who, Izzy, again, isn't Australian. I think that put a lot more chips in Strickland's corner and you saw the applause that he got. And then if you watch the broadcast and you turn the volume up, Izzy's getting quite an amount of boos when he's walking out to the octagon. He's getting a lot of boos. And I think if you're not familiar with the story, like, why are they booing Izzy? It's because there's a lot of miscalculations leading up to this fight. People didn't like a lot of things that he was doing. So again, that I think adds value to him getting a rest, taking a long break, let people forget about this, let the division figure itself out, and then jump back in. But my question for you, Chael, to Bo Nickal, there's nobody I'm higher on. I'm all up on Bo's nuts. I'm on Hamzat's hairy nuts. I love both guys. If you're Bo Nickal's management, what are you telling him? You're telling him, let's shoot for the stars here. You're ready to take on a Duplessis because he beats him. We're probably going title next. Do you think he's ready for that, or does he need one or two more, maybe in the outside of the top five? Because I know where my head's at. My head's pretty high on Bo.
Question, because you said if you're the management. So, if you're the management, I think you sit back and go, Bo, it pays the same. Bo was the biggest favorite in UFC history for his last fight. 2,400, right? Biggest ever. No fight has ever gone. But if you're the managers, you would say, Bo, it pays the same to take on the top guys or to fight these guys that they're signing just to fight you. Your of the night bonuses and your eligibility for that, all of this pays the same. I believe you can beat all of the tough guys. Why bother? You haven't left the first round yet, and you're getting the same paychecks as if you would if you were a co-main event. Not for nothing, Bo's in a pretty sweet spot. Now, Bo, the competitor, yes, I've known him basically his whole life. Of course, he wants to go in and do some of those big matches. He doesn't know quite how to get them, and he does have a code. He's a very polite, and he's a gentleman, and he's not willing to sell that part of himself for the business, so it's going to be a little bit of a longer path. But it just does seem like there is some massive opportunity. Duplessis just called him out. That was in December. They placed him on the same card. Bo was ahead. Not for nothing. You can't say that Bo doesn't qualify for Duplessis. Qualified for the same card, and whoever placed it put him 3 spots above him. Somebody already thinks he's done a good job, not to mention he hasn't lost sense. I just think there's opportunity to go after some of these other guys, and I feel that people miss it. I'll use an example, which is Henry Cejudo. Henry knows he's not going to get Sean O'Malley right now, so Henry's trying to get Merab. It's not because he wants to fight Merab. He just realizes, if I can't get this, let me get the next best thing, which will put me in line for something else. And I feel like that's a miss all the time, where guys go after, the head guy, but now they got competition. 5 other guys are going for him too. Nobody ever goes after the number 1 contender. Or the really smart guys would have hedged their bet a week ago and they've called out Sean Strickland. Nobody thought Sean had a chance, so nobody did it. But I'm just saying, like, there's a different way to do this. And if you're a Bo Nickal spot and it pays the same to be the greatest favorite ever and fight guys that people haven't heard of, and they're going to put you on TV to do it, I don't know why you would rattle that cage.
Yeah, I think my line to think, if I'm his management, I'm telling Dana, hey, we'll fight the Duplessis, we'll fight the Jared Cannoniers of the world. We'll even entertain the Hamzat, because we know Bo wants to fight Hamzat. He came on this show, said he wanted to fight him, that day. He wants to fight Hamzat. So if I'm his management, Bo's down to take those top 5 fights. We got to talk about the contract, though. I know he has a big contract, especially for being, just a kind of a blue chip kind of guy. He doesn't have the accolades as far as in the octagon. But if I'm his management going, we're into this. We think we can beat these guys, but we got to renegotiate this contract. I think Dan would be willing to play ball. They have the money.
No, I think so too. I think that you're completely right. And I just don't know how long we're going to do the same thing over and over. I mean, I'm going back to Izzy and Sean. It looks like we're going to redo Izzy and Sean. I'm fine with that, and I understand it. But what happens if Sean, I apologize, what happens if Izzy wins? Do we all then go, well, the world has been right? It's like, well, I don't know about that. Sean just dominated him. I don't know what Izzy could possibly do to match that level of domination. It would still seem like you're square, and you've got to run him back out there again. Yeah, but the world can't always work that way. We can't just keep on doing rematches. I've never understood the Rose situation, by the way. Just Rose versus Joanna. Joanna's this big star. She's supposed to beat up Rose. Rose catches her, knocks her out. So we go to a rematch. But the rematch wasn't just because we thought she caught her. Wanted the belt around Joanna. This is the way the story is supposed to be told. And Rose beats her again. So then Rose has to do that with somebody named Wei Li. They fight. Rose knocks her out. Wei Li never touched her, never pushed her, grabbed her, kicked her. There was nothing about that says rematch. There was just something that said, oh, we've got our answer. The better fighter is this young lady. They rematch them. It's a totally different fight, but Rose finds a way to beat her again. And I mean, I'm just sharing for you, like, there's not very many times when those fights go down that the boys don't get it right the first time. Like, this is how we're going to settle this. This is what we've all agreed upon. We know when, we even know the weight class. They generally get it figured out themselves the first time. So it's kind of hard to see what would be different versus Izzy and Sean. And I don't even need to win the world over and say Sean's a better fighter. You can think Izzy's a better fighter. It could be a matchup issue. Either way, I don't know how we're going to convince the audience that a different result is likely to happen. And I think it's a challenge, because if it does happen, I don't think they're going to the third fight. And I don't think Sean's going to get shown the same respect that he's showing Izzy. And it's just an early prediction, but I'll make that comment.
I'm with you, brother. Outside the UFC, are you following any of this Logan Paul, Dillon Danis stuff, even though they're the co-main event? I mean, it's hard to miss it, especially with the business we're in. It's interesting. It's interesting because, even, the comments you made about the Nogueira brothers or Anderson Silva, we knew it was a character, and it was a very WWE of you. These young kids, man, the Jake Pauls of the world, Dillon Danis, the KSIs, the Logan Pauls, dude, there's just nothing's out of limits. Nothing's off limits. It's just, these guys just go for blood, man. Girlfriends, fiancés, dead dads, friends. It's like first rule of Fight Club. Be cool, man. Be cool.
Yeah, man. I followed every single bit of it. I feel terrible that Dillon's in a lawsuit, though. I mean, that's just a pain in the ass. That's going to take a little while. But yeah. I mean, this co-main event has so greatly outshined the main event. I feel like those guys maybe would give them a little emphasis to pick up their game. I mean, that is the most sought after boxing match going on right now. And I know how silly or amazing that might sound to say that.
Yeah. I know.
Brandon, I've never heard them talk about boxing. This guy leads with the jab, so I'm going to go southpaw. Me and my coach, I've never heard them talk about boxing yet. And I'm still looking forward to it. You know, the lawsuit. Can I tell you a lawsuit story? Get a load of this. So, because it would seem like Dillon could tell Jake, hey, man, or tell Logan, hey, the gig is up. You got to make her drop this lawsuit. Like,
Agreed.
when we're done boxing, we are now done. I don't want this following me around. You got to make her do that. I was in Canada fighting with Bodog. Matt Lindland, who's my corner man and roommate, goes out on the town with Phil Baroni, who happened to be his arch nemesis at the time, but they go out. And we're all in one room. Like, you remember those days where the budgets were so low. So I know when Matt left, and I know when Matt comes back because the door makes noise and it wakes me up. And I said, where have you been? Because it was so late. He said, I'm going to go out for a couple hours. I said, where have you been? He says, I've been in jail. Go back to sleep. And it's like, you've been in jail, and I'm cutting weight. You know, I'm hurt. Like, I kind of want this sleep just to escape the torture of cutting weight. He's like, yeah, I've been in jail. I got bailed out. Go back to sleep. It's like, no. I can't. So now I'm sitting up, the lights on, like, okay, tell me everything. Well, they were at some kind of a bar, and the woman was cleaning the tables, and whatever that spray stuff she is, it's like sprayed Matt. So Matt like grabbed it and like told her, you know, don't point that at me. She calls the police for violence, battery, whatever you would call this. It turns out that she is the girlfriend of one of the top biker gang members in town. This biker gang, if I could produce their name, I never did know, but they were fighting in Bodog. We had like 4 or 5 of them on a card, and all their friends would come and watch.
Jesus.
Hold that thought. Fast forward, we're in Russia 3 months later. This lawsuit is still going, which means Matt has to get a legal team and go to the country of Canada. It's a total nightmare over this misdemeanor of spraying this chemical. Okay. Matt puts a Copenhagen in at lunch. One of the biker gang members says, can I have a dip? And what he doesn't realize is they don't sell loose tobacco outside of America, at least not in those countries. So we couldn't get any Copenhagen. And Matt puts it in and he looks at how much he has left and he tells the guy, no, don't have enough. I'm in the same spot as you. Like, you're out, but I'm going to run out. I can't share it. And the guy goes, I'll give you $100 for whatever's in that can. And the guy says, he goes, I don't even know what's left in the can. I'll give you $100 for the whole can. And Matt sits there and he thinks, and he goes, make that lawsuit go away and you can have the can.
Oh, wow.
And the guy goes, if I make the lawsuit go away, you give me the can. Matt gives him the can. That guy made one phone call, and we never heard about that lawsuit again, which I think is an amazing story. But I bring it to you because, like, in some regard, it's like, Logan Paul, you're getting points. You're getting received on this. Whether Dillon went about this the way you wanted to or not, he already started. He can't stop until bell time. We all understand. Make that go away. You got to make that go. When you guys are done with each other, right? The dispute is settled here. We all walk away clean.
Agree 100%. I don't like it from Logan Paul or his fiance. It's also, Logan Paul, you signed a deal with Dillon Danis. This guy, he's a troll. It's what he does. And I like Dillon. I'll say it on record. I'm a fan of Dillon. And when you made that deal, he said, okay, I'll take the fight, but I'm going to sell this thing. And Logan goes, please do. It's more money for me. He goes, okay. And that's what he's doing. And that's all anybody's talking about is Dillon Danis's antics. And now you want to sue the guy? You got to know who you're getting to bed with, man. You made a deal with the devil, and now you don't like the way he's playing, but he's selling this thing. Whether I agree with it or not, which I don't, but it's Dillon Danis. You made this deal, man. And now you're going to discipline him in a lawsuit? Come on. I don't like it. I don't like across the board. I don't like that Dillon started going for his fiance, but he decided to do it. And not only decided to do it, but it's gaining all this attraction. That's why we're talking about the fight. Otherwise, we're not talking about it. And then Logan doesn't like the way he's selling the fight, even though it's kind of brilliant, even though I don't agree with it. It's brilliant. It's getting millions and millions and millions of views every time he posts. And now you're going to discipline the guy and you got a lawsuit? The whole thing just doesn't make me feel good. Whenever I talk about Dillon Logan, I don't feel good about it. I'll watch the fight now. And now hopefully Dillon has pulled out of several fights. I think he shows up for this one. I would assume he shows up for this one.
And it would seem like if you could get those two guys in a room, like no cameras, nobody knows what goes on. I feel like they could reason with one another where Logan's going to go, hey, man, I have a responsibility to this girl, and I've got to do everything I can to protect her. You understand it? And Dillon's going to go, hey, I fully get it. I didn't know this was going to work this well. But Logan, make sure you understand. How else was I going to build the fight? Like, there's no scenario where we talk about common opponents, or we talk about back in the day when we were coming up through the Junior Olympics and we sparred together, or we're at the training camp. Like, I'm not a boxer and you're not a boxer. I'm willing to box and you have boxed, but neither, like, what did you want me to turn to except for making it personal? Not to mention, I only put out photos that I found online the rest of the world saw anyway. I mean, I feel as though Logan would probably go, yeah, okay. I mean, you either want me to build a fight or not.
You would hope. You'd hope Logan goes, I get it. And he's like, Logan, also, look, tell me another route to go. Anytime I post your girl, one of them got 9 million views, dude. What is KSI doing to sell this thing? And that's your teammate. That's your boy in prime. He's not doing shit. So this is my only angle. And to your point, I think he would go, you're right. My bad. You're right. But, there's just, these kids are savages, man. Absolute savages. Yeah. They have there's no line they won't cross. And that's what they signed up for. Before I get you out of here, you posted a video on the BTK killer. Now you're talking my language. I got my black belt in serial killers. I got my master's degree in serial killers. I am Mr. Serial Killer. Talk to me, Chael. What's BTK? He's my least favorite because he killed kids. He's my least favorite. My favorite's Richard Ramirez. I'm a Ted Bundy fan and Jeffrey Dahmer. Fan of, I'm not a fan of what they did. I'm saying when it comes to these horrible people. BTK is my least favorite. He's a horrible human being. I think he's probably the worst serial killer we've ever had because the way he went about it and killing kids and making them watch them kill, their siblings. Terrible person. You decided to break down BTK killer. What's the video here? I haven't seen it. My team told me, they go, Chael's into serial killers. I went, say what?
And I think you went with Richard Ramirez. Wasn't he the Night Stalker?
That's Richard the Night Stalker.
And he was kind of like a handsome guy. All these women were trying to marry him while he was on death row, by the way.
Everyone says Ted Bundy. It's Richard Ramirez, best looking serial killer of all time.
The interesting thing with BTK is when he made his confession, I mean, they already had him. They had him and they were going to sentence him to death. But when he goes in, the judge tells him, I have to live with this decision as much as you have to die with this decision. Now, I know this is written down. I know what you told the prosecutors, but I need to hear you say it. Let's start at story one. Tell me about the Williamson family. I'm throwing names in, but he starts at the beginning, and he was extremely candid. And he spoke for an hour and 45 minutes, and he confessed to everything. To your point, the kids, sexual assaults after they were dead. I mean, things that you wouldn't even ask of, things that are going to get you the death penalty. But he retold the story in such a chilling way. It was as though a middle-aged man looked back at the high school football game that he was very proud of. Like, BTK did this as though he was enjoying it, and he was extremely calm. And the reason that's relevant is when he got to the end, and the judge said, have we missed anything? And he said no. Everyone believed him. Like, as terrible of a guy as this was, the one thing they didn't think he was a liar, because he was so good with the details. So all these years later, the house that he lived in at the time of the crimes, and his daughter's turned on him. I mean, she's written books, what it's like being his daughter and the wife. They've done their best to move on. They go through the house that he once lived in, and I assume they've sold the house, and maybe they've sold it a couple times. That's one part of the detail that I don't have, is who had access to the house, but I think it was somebody down the road. At any point, brings you to last week, they found 2 trapdoors. And the police, as much as they searched it, and the wife and daughter who had lived in it, nobody knew about these 2 trapdoors. the people call the police come over, they go into the trapdoors, and he had left basically a journal. He had confessed to other crimes. And I will tell you, when he got arrested, I was a very young adult, but I just remember that bind, torture, kill, BTK. And his wife would always tell him, because he was a traveling salesman, he had to leave for work all the time. And his wife would tell him how scared she was when he was gone, because we've got this criminal around. And he said, he almost said this for comic relief. But I let her know she was going to be just fine. And that was supposed to be like this funny one. Yeah, and there was something that kind of was humorous about it. But I remember when I heard that 20-some years ago, I remember when I heard that saying, wait a minute, if he's a serial killer and he's on the road, somebody should be cross-referencing where he went up against cold case files and up against the way those bodies were found. But that was never thought to do, because he was so candid and so open about what he did. Well, sure enough, he left this journal and he had taken trophies. And just by example, there was a girl that went missing in Oklahoma, and the last known photo of her was taken by her friend on something called a Polaroid, which used to be very popular. Within that Polaroid, she's wearing a blue shirt. That purple shirt was found
Yikes.
in one of the crawl spaces, along with a note in his journal about killing this girl in Oklahoma. So now that we've found out he killed at least the girl in Oklahoma, how many others? Are there hundreds? How many more girls did he kill? And nobody really knows. They were really stunned, like pathologists and whatnot. Forensics experts were stunned to find out there was anyone he didn't mention because he loved it. He was so open. He's done writings on it. He was so open. Now it turns out there's an entire potentially Pandora's box, and that's why he made the news. And by the way, you want to speak about the killers that are. What about the guy that went upside down in Pennsylvania? They still haven't found that guy.
Yeah, man. I think it's interesting with if you're the BTK killer, you have nothing to lose, man. Just tell us what's going on. You're never getting out. Just give us the info, dude. Why be secret about this? Especially, if they're trophies to him. That's what that Gigolo beach killer out there that they caught, that guy, he's interested. And they're actually looking into this because he had a lot of business in Arizona, then also outside of Seattle. He had a storage unit outside Seattle, I think. So he's another guy, and there's a lot of cold cases out there. They're going to start looking into that as well. So it's all weird, man. And also, when you're talking about Richard Ramirez, BTK, Ted Bundy, Dahmer, Ed Gaines, Kemper, all these guys, that was like the golden age of serial killers. And they have all these cool names and their T-shirts and documentaries on Netflix. Those days are over. There's something like over 65, I think 68 serial killers active today in North America, but they don't give them cool names anymore. So these guys, they come like Little Dick Killer or whatever. They don't get like, Night Stalker and BTK. They got smart about it. The media got smart finally. The mainstream media were like, we got to stop giving these guys cool names. So we don't hear about them anymore. But there's over 60, 11 currently active serial killers, unsolved cases though, Chin. That's unsolved cases.
Sure.
But there's over 60, I think, right now. So it's interesting.
You mentioned real briefly Ed Kemper, but yeah, that's
Smartest
another one that's extremely chilling. They've got
the highest IQ.
Yeah, that's right. And the Iceman's a very interesting one. The Iceman is what Stone Cold Steve Austin credits for coming up with his character of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh, interesting.
The Iceman that was just, Stone Cold. And yeah, man, when you start going down that rabbit hole of serial kill, it's hard to stop. I used to grow up on a show called Unsolved Mysteries, and on Sunday nights, it was called America's Most Wanted. And it was never missed, but I remember trying to sleep those nights, like as a little guy. I remember thinking, never watch this again, never watch these shows again. Like, they have an effect on you.
Oh, I'm 40, dude. I have nightmares. And sometimes my girl's like, stop watching and reading this crap. I'm like, I can't. Mr. Chael Sonnen, you're the best. You're the only guy I wanted to talk to about the state of the middleweight division, the UFC, the WWE merger, the UFC. You're the best, man. The absolute best.
You're awesome. I appreciate you, Brendan. Have a good day, brother.
All right, brother. Appreciate you.